Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm just curious to know how many people are studying astrology, feel like they know some astrology. Good to know. I like to check in. So my name is Harmony. My astrology name is Divine Harmony. And at the end of the PowerPoint, I'll give you my website. Just so you know my background, I do Western. And I have my master's in depth psychology from an amazing school, graduate school called Pacifica Graduate Institute. Everybody has their lens they view life through, and astrologers are the same, and that will inform how we interpret things. And so definitely my lens comes from depth psychology, but also spirituality. And so I'm really interested in how to blend and work with each other. So in this talk, I'm talking about the divine feminine in astrology. And I'll explain to you what that is in a moment. First, I wanted to do this invocation to the star goddess, and for some reason the top line is slightly truncated, but you can close your eyes, just center, listen. It's this beautiful invocation by Starhawk to the star goddess. Hear the words of the star goddess, the dust of whose feet are the hosts of heaven, whose body encircles the universe. I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon, among the stars and the mysteries of the waters, I call upon your soul to arise and come unto me. For I am the soul of nature that gives life to the universe. From me all things proceed, and unto me they must return. Let my worship be in the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Let there be beauty and strength, power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you. And you who seek to know me, know that your seeking and yearning will avail you not unless you know the mystery. For if that which you seek you find not within yourself, you will never find it without. For behold, I have been there with you from the beginning, and I am that which is attained at the end of desire. So I would like to call on Spider Woman and Ariane Rod and Ariadne to weave the divine feminine back into balance in astrology and in the world. So for me, patriarchal astrology, or not patriarchal, sorry, traditional astrology, I'm trying to move to the next one, was very patriarchal based, the way that it's been handed down to us. Only 2 feminine archetypes in the total of the 10 planets. Sun and moon are technically not planets, they're luminaries, they're lights, but you can call them planets just to put them all together in a similar grouping. Only 2 of them are feminine, the moon and Venus. And that pretty much limited feminine archetypal expression to moon, mother, and Venus, lover or partner. And that was, all that women had to identify with, and also men to understand and within their partners, but also within themselves. And we essentially need to bring in more archetypes to understand the balance of things. To me, it's not about, by the way, this is my perspective, it's not about the divine feminine coming back in and taking over. I feel like it's all about a balance. I personally feel like we've gone through eons of going back and forth, one overpowering the other and the other overpowering the other, and we're really seeking to find a balance now. Demetra George, who's an amazing astrologer that talks a lot about the goddess and especially the dark feminine, she talks about how the goddess herself goes through phases like the moon, and that this recent epoch of 2,000 plus years where we feel like she's been missing, repressed, demonized, is actually she's been in her dark moon phase. So on some level, she has been choosing to go into the dark because it was preparing her to move out back into the light of the new moon phase, which is where we're at right now. We're literally in this transition of the dark moon to the new moon with the divine feminine, and it's a whole new cycle of her birth coming back in. And so that's kind of how I'm seeing the divine feminine. I'm not coming from a she's been repressed, demonized, or angry place. It's more about the cycles, and we're moving into a new cycle, and she's coming out again. We also, in traditional astrology, it's really good to question things, because a lot of what was written was based on patriarchal consciousness. An example of this would be the fixed star Sinistra, which you can see over there in the man's hand. It sounds sinister, right? Sinistra. Well, the star has a negative association to it, traditionally speaking. But the Latin meaning for Sinistra means left-handed path, or the left hand in general. The left has been associated with the feminine in mystic cultures for like a long time. And so it started taking on meanings like evil, threatening. To be left-handed was to be touched by the devil. It was very unlucky. Juxtapose that with the right hand, which means right, meaning correct and proper. So ironically, it's actually, Sinistra, this sinister star, has a connection to the feminine. This particular constellation also does too. Ophiuchus and the serpent bearer. Ophiuchus, if you go back into the history and start digging in, a lot of times Ophiuchus was seen as a woman handling the serpent, but then it was, all of a sudden it became a man. That happened to a lot of things in astrology. A lot of original, myths and stories. The woman got demoted, she got replaced, all kinds of interesting things have happened. But if you come from the perspective of we've been in the dark moon phase, she may have chosen to go away as well. It's not like, oh, poor her. It's like she's a powerful force. We don't need to worry about her. It's more about understanding the cycles that the goddess goes through, just like the moon. And also understanding where we're at in the context of that cycle now. Another example of the demonization of the feminine energy is Algol. It's the eye of Medusa, and she's often called the demon star. And Medusa is a dark goddess, and pre-patriarchy she was actually revered and loved, and seen as beautiful. Her patriarchal myth, she was a temple virgin of Athena, but Poseidon raped her in the temple. And then she got made and punished, she got turned into the evil thing that she's now seen as. So essentially everything about her is symbolic. The snakes in her hair represent wisdom and her connection to the goddess. Her ability to turn man to stone when he looks her in the eye is symbolic of her ability to see beyond the surface and get to the truth. And actually the dark goddess is kind of the natural enemy for patriarchal consciousness, because patriarchal consciousness is based on the ego. And it's like, what we can see here, we're in control of. The dark feminine sees beyond the ego. She actually sees to the truth, and in that process shatters the ego. So they're kind of natural, enemies. They're opposed to one another, and it's one of the reasons why the dark feminine has been the most, demonized aspect of the feminine consciousness. So essentially this is actually quite a powerful fixed star, and with great power comes great responsibility. So it's not to say there's no shadow. Of everything I look at, I always look at the light and the shadow, because everything has light and shadow. But to say that this is an evil, negative fixed star is actually patriarchal repression at its worst. And there's a lot of famous celebrities with Algol in their chart, like Johnny Depp, Joan Collins, Princess Diana, Liv Tyler, and more. So for me, it's important to question things and to reimagine, retell, or retrieve the stories that got manipulated, particularly ones around the powerful goddess figures that have been with us for a long time, but somehow they got, disempowered. They become the wives of other people. They get stripped of their power, kind of like a nana going into the underworld. So, in this lecture, we're going to talk about the divine feminine archetypes in astrology, what we can talk about and bring in to create the balance. Initially, 10 planets, 2 are feminine. These are the things we're going to speak to that bring in more feminine archetypal expression and create a balance in the chart or in the skies, so that there's both voices being heard in equal measure. We're going to talk about the asteroid goddesses, the 3 Liliths, and then I'm going to speak on a little bit of Venus and the moon. And I'm also going to talk about some of the transits that relate to the divine feminine that are going on right now. I'm just curious to know how many people have heard of the asteroid goddesses? And how many people have heard of Lilith? Right, so we'll move into them. So here's you know, the little glyphs for them, and we're going to go into each of them. Just so you know, to me it's all about bringing the divine feminine back into balance, and that's a big thing that's going on in the world, and then there's different areas in the world that this is needing to be reflected in, and astrology is just one of them. Men who are in tune with their feminine will express these female asteroids, otherwise they show up as women in their lives. Women, these are archetypes for, you know, women to embody. It all depends on, you know, how conscious we are of them, and that's, you would only know by looking at your chart and seeing where they're positioned. So we will start with, well, here's an image of them I got on the internet. We're going to start with Juno, the wife. So Juno ends up, she's the wife asteroid, and she has to do with commitment and marriage and contractual arrangements. And it's actually good to have Juno, because Venus, if you know anything about her myth, she was not traditional wife material. Like, she was married to, I never say his name right, Hephaestus. Yeah, thank you. And cheated on him all the time, constantly. And she was really into like pleasure and enjoying herself, and that, you know, often was at the, you know, opposite end of the spectrum of commitment and loyalty and fidelity. And so Juno is about commitment and loyalty and fidelity. She's the wife of Zeus, and she's the queen of the gods, and she's very invested in her role as wife and partner. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this correlates to Hera as well?
Yes, Hera.
Just, if you don't mind relating to
Yeah. Juno and Hera. So the asteroid itself is called Juno. So if you were to look up Hera, it would bring up another smaller body. But yes, so Hera is her Roman name.
The Grecian.
Greek name, sorry. Juno is her Roman name. And that's a good one, thank you. I'll let you know both names for each of the four that we're about to speak to. So, you know, her husband is Jupiter, and she governs partnership, marriage, commitment, fairness, and compromise. You know, those things that we understand we will sacrifice in order to be in a partnership, understanding it's not all about what I want, kind of thing. And so there's a beautiful energy to Juno. She also, though, governs jealousy, infidelity, fears of abandonment, and equality or lack thereof in relationship. Because Zeus was constantly cheating on her. Constantly. With other goddesses, with humans, like all over the map. Her whole story is about being cheated on. And what, say it again?
Oh, animals and trees.
Oh yeah, anything that worked. So Zeus cheated all the time, and she would get mad, and she'd have revenge on the women, not Zeus. You know, it was very interesting. So Juno speaks to the wife-husband relationship, but she also speaks to the shadow of when we lose ourselves in others, where we don't have healthy boundaries, where there's inequality. Major transits to Juno in someone's natal chart can be critical times to forming, altering, or ending committed relationships. So new people coming in, or, you know, divorce, or whatever. It's like really looking at the equality and the fairness in a relationship. Venus is, you know, as I said, she's more about sex and intimacy and pleasure, and Juno ends up being about the actual commitment. The other thing with Juno is the first Roman mint was called Juno Moneta, and so there's a relationship with Juno and money, and that makes sense. Money and marriage, money is a business agreement, you know, not necessarily about love. Venus, pleasure, connection, could be if you have both of them working together. Today, Juno is actually in Libra, which if she were going to be associated with any sign, it would be Libra. Libra is the sign of balance and harmony and relationship and partnership. So she's in a sign that she's like resonant with right now. She's been in like some pretty powerful aspects the last month. She tensely aspected Neptune and Pluto, and then this coming week, like Monday through Wednesday, I think, she opposes Uranus and quincunxes Chiron, and so there's these outer planet energies of dissolution, death and rebirth, transformation, change, wounds coming up, and healing that can result if we choose to, you know, navigate the path of healing through the pain. All of that is affecting Juno right now. And so there definitely can be major changes and shifting going on in relationships and commitments and contractual arrangements at this moment in time. And if I'm not a big like celebrity news person. I'm not a big news person either, really. But I'm on Facebook sometimes, and I'll see the little, news. That's where I get my news. Facebook. And there have been a lot of like long relationships that people in the celebrity news, people they didn't think would ever split, and they're splitting. I don't remember them all, but it's people are like, oh my God, shocking. And I read this one blog where this guy was like, 2015 was the worst year for marriage and divorce with famous people or whatever. Anyhow, you can Google it if you want more information. But there's something to it, so there's a reason. And there's been a lot of shifting and changing. And well, one thing I want to mention is we just had a series of 4 total lunar eclipses. It's called a tetrad of lunar eclipses. And total meaning completely obscuring the face of the sun, or moon, and they turned a dusky red. And they were all in Aries and Libra. And Aries is ruled by Mars, and Libra is ruled by Venus, and these are the divine lovers. This is who Venus was mostly cheating on her husband with. And they're natural partners, but these eclipses have been all about massive changes in the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And you've seen it in relationships where people are having difficulties, and they're either able to transform and evolve, or they're falling apart. But it's also an inner process. And to me, any outer relationship thing is merely a mirror reflection for something inside that we're seeking to find union with. And so to me, this tetrad of eclipses are like a sea change, like massive activation of how we do that inner union, and then how that expresses out in our lives. Not just romantically, any union relationship where there's 2 people joining together, energetically or otherwise. Now, Vesta is the priestess, and she's one of my favorites. She's also known as the sister or the nun. Vesta is the woman who owns herself. And priestess status actually made it so that you were not owned by a man. And I remember reading somewhere, I can't reference where I got this from, but that back in the day, a while ago, 1,000 years ago, whatever, if you were a priestess, you got to take your dowry with you, and then you got to even keep land or something. It was the only way a woman could retain what it is she had, that was part of her inheritance. Otherwise, it was owned by dad and given to husband, and it was just, woman as property. And so being a priestess is one of the only ways you could get out of that cycle. And, and then worship the goddess or the god or whoever it is you were serving. It's the most introverted of all the archetypes. All the others are focused on outer life accomplishments and roles. This is about the inner life, and it's about maintaining the inner fire. The glyph for her, and I forgot to mention the glyph for the other one, I can go back. The glyph here is the fire on the earth. You can see it in the lower right side. It's the eternal flame held in the torch, or the containment of spirit. And literally, she was the keeper of the flame. Like Vesta, back in the ancient days when we didn't have electricity, you could just turn on the lights of the oven. You kept the fire burning, because if the fire went out, it was not so easy to make the fire start up again. And so Vesta was seen as sleeping by the fire. She would sleep by it to make sure that, if 1 o'clock in the morning it's dwindling, she can add some more wood. And so she is ever there, ever present, making sure that flame is going. It's the inner flame as well as the outer flame. Her Greek counterpart is Hestia. And she has a lot to do with devotion, duty to a sacred or altruistic cause. It's like where we really know why we're here and what we're doing, and being so focused on it. But too much Vesta can be a workaholic. She can use her work or her calling as a compensation. She can emotionally distance herself. She's actually the most impersonal of all of the other archetypes. Juno's the wife. We'll get to Ceres, she's the mother. Pallas, Athena's the daughter. This one, it's not about her relationship to any, man outside of her. It's all about the relationship to the divine within. She can tend to sublimate her needs for greater goals, but then, the whole integration of that with personal relationships can be difficult. She can actually be a challenge to personal relationships because she's so, focused on why she's here. It's like easily able to ignore everything else. Ultimately, it's about the balance. So wherever she is in the natal chart, there's a focus of our attention on what we're devoted to. And she's also very much about wholeness, like the interior wholeness that we are seeking, not the wholeness that we get from being someone's wife or being someone's child or being someone's brother or sister. It's like wholeness with the relationship with the divine. Today, Vesta is actually at 29 degrees of Pisces, which is the very last degree of the whole entire zodiac. The first degree of Aries is the Alpha degree, and 29 Pisces is the Omega degree. She's actually retrograde, so she's not about to move into Aries yet. And she's actually on the South Node, the karmic South Node. And so if you know Vedic, there's Rahu and Ketu, the North Node, the South Node. The North Node is where our evolution and growth is, but it's not the easy growth. It's where we're pushed out of the nest and we figure out how to fly falling down. South Node is what we came in with, we can be good at. Some of our most amazing gifts are in our South Node. But it's also where we stay stuck because we've been through it so much and it's so familiar and it's easy and we don't want to go into uncomfortable places, which is the North Node. So the South Node, can point to gifts, but also where we'll get stuck. And so Vesta on the South Node can be in one level this deep remembering of the path of the priestess. And, with all the divine feminine stuff that's going on in astrology right now, which I'll get to, there's a huge waking. Suppress, that would be Lilith. And then Eve is our subconscious also, but she's the small part of the inner self we have full control over. And so Eve is what we're programmed to believe is acceptable. And then Eve and Lilith are essentially polar opposites, and together they form the whole self. And so it's, you can look at all kinds of myths and stories and see different ways to look at it. This is one way to look at this story. And even the Lover's card, which is not this, but the Lover's card in tarot, the traditional, or Rider-Waite, Adam and Eve are the subconscious and conscious, and then the angel is the higher self in the card. So you can see it playing out there. Adam's insistence on Lilith lying beneath him is the civilized mind. So Adam is the civilized mind, and then the two aspects of the feminine are two different parts of the subconscious. So his insistence on having Lilith lie beneath him is the civilized mind's attempt to rein in and suppress the animal instincts, and to be superior to it. So when they banished Lilith, they got rid of natural animal instincts, and they got put to the recesses of our minds. So a good retelling of the Lilith myth is this book. Has anybody heard of The Lineage of the Codes of Light? Yeah, excellent book. So they go through a bunch of amazing stories of women who were powerful, who held the light codes of consciousness through, and it's a fiction book, but there's, truth in it, and it comes through, and it's an excellent book.
What was that called?
It's called The Lineage of the Codes of Light, and there's another one called The Brotherhood of the Magi, which is amazing. You read the first one first and the second one second. The third one she came out with, it was almost like a different person was writing. It was harder for me to get through. I don't think I finished it. I might try it again, but the first two I recommend. So on to Lilith. So there's three Liliths. There's asteroid Lilith, dark moon Lilith, black moon Lilith, and I'm going to speak to all three. Some of them, these little glyph things are like, some people say this is the glyph. This isn't consensus yet, and there's not a ton of astrologers that use Lilith. So if you were to talk to some, they'd be like, oh, whatever, right? We don't even use her. So I'm just telling you, these are the glyphs that have the most support behind them for representing these things. But who knows? We might have something else that comes in. So asteroid Lilith is the most embodied. It's the only Lilith that's actually real and visible, but you need a telescope. And so she can also signify, or because she's the most embodied, she can signify the repressed elements related to sexuality and anger, which require healing and embodied expression. I see all these Liliths as like a trinity, and asteroid Lilith is the wounded dark feminine. So on the spectrum of the dark goddess, the dark feminine, there's the wounded aspect, and then there's, going to the other extreme. And so, they're both wounded, actually. The extremes are wounded, and then we're coming, trying to find the center. So asteroid Lilith is the victim. So she's the disempowered, suppressed, dark feminine, where she feels her power has been taken from her. She's, feels like powerless. She feels like a victim. This can come through as repressed anger and rage that doesn't get expressed, so it comes through as illness and depression. She's very much a repressed, ostracized energy, and she's where we can be implosive. It's like we implode because we're like this force inside of us doesn't have an expression, and so it goes in. when I look at the Liliths, I look at all three of them together because they show a story. So the next one is Dark Moon Lilith. And there is a question as if she's even real. She's a seldom seen dusky dark moon that circles Earth. And some people say she's real and some people say she's not, and they'll argue forever. And Dark Moon Lilith is also the wounded expression. She's the other end of the spectrum. And so she's the tyrant. She's the one that's got this dark goddess energy in her, but she's angry, she's full of rage, and she's bitter, and she's acting it out. And she sexually and financially manipulates others in the masculine because of she's so angry, but she's not dealing with her anger. She tries to overpower others, and she is actually explosive. So Asteroid Lilith is implosive, she's the victim. Dark Moon Lilith is explosive, she's the tyrant. Both of these are the extreme opposite ends of a spectrum of the dark feminine. And the third one is the one in the middle, and that would be Black Moon Lilith. So she's a hypothetical point. She's kind of like the nodes of the moon, if you know astrology. Like you don't actually see a node out there. Like it's all mathematically calculated. So she, for those who are interested in the exact definition, she's the second focal point of the moon's elliptical orbit around Earth. And she's essentially the same point that the moon is at its farthest point from Earth, reaching out to the sun. So she's considered like an invisible energy vortex. And but she's also powerful, just like the nodes. She, to me, is the empowered whole dark feminine. She has worked through her victim, and she's worked through her tyrant, and she's found her center. And in her centered, empowered place, she's super creative, spiritual, mystical, intuitive, connected to her sexuality, connected to her own ability to birth things, but also, bring them back in and let them go. She's, again, has this energy of womb and tomb, creation and destruction. So she's a creatrix, but she's also a destroyer. And she understands both of those energies, and doesn't split off to one or the other. She also has to do with the passion of the soul, and she's deeply intuitive and anchored in the body and centered in herself. So these things you can't see in a normal chart. You actually have to calculate them. Like you can calculate them on astro.com if you can do like free charts there. There's special things you have to put in to ask to show in the chart. So it's not something that will come up in astrology software automatically. You have to configure it. And I'll give you an example just of, like, I'm really into the dark goddess. So I have Black Moon Lilith on my sun, and I have Dark Moon Lilith. Dark Moon Lilith is conjunct my Chiron, the wounded healer, and Asteroid Lilith is square Saturn. So I have all three, and the two, the tyrant and the victim, I have with like very intense, placement. Saturn actually is patriarchy, and it's where we feel repressed and demonized, or not demonized, sorry, it's where we feel repressed and limited and restricted. Chiron is where we have deep wounds and pain, and there's this journey of healing. And so I have both of them associated with that, and then I've got Black Moon Lilith on my sun. So you can look to see where they are in your chart and see the story. And then Algol could be considered the fourth Lilith, so she's the demon star. I don't call her that. That's what they call her. The Eye of Medusa, the eye, I read this somewhere, and it says, the eye that perceives with an objectivity like that of nature itself, and our dreams, boring into the soul to find the naked truth, to see reality beneath all its myriad forms and the illusions and defenses it displays. To me, that's the dark goddess in a nutshell. And you can understand why she's been kind of, like, it's kind of an intense energy to hold. And to hold it for yourself, first and foremost, to be wanting to see through your own illusions. How many people, like, voluntarily want to do that? Like, that's intense. And so then imagine bigger stage, like the world. It's like our world has been built on certain things that are complete illusions, fabricated lies. And, I understand people who don't want to go there. Like, it's scary. Like, you have to pretty much, like, rip up the foundation and start over in some respects. And that's like the journey of a nana into the underworld and getting stripped. It's deeply powerful and empowering ultimately, but it's intense initially and probably through the whole process until you come out the other end. I want to speak to Eris real quick. She's new to me, and so I'm drawn to her, but I'm not like well versed in her. So I just want to speak to her. How many people have heard of Eris? She's a new planet that they say could be is it the 11th planet, the 10th planet? I forget. 10th. well, yeah, because the sun's, well, I don't know, I get confused there because when they're saying 11th, are they including the sun and the moon? Anyhow, she was just discovered, and where did my little clicker thing go?
She has another name though.
Eris?
Yeah, don't they?
Another, like her Roman name or her Greek name?
No, just the modern day.
Oh, Xena. They originally said, oops, that's not, see, this happened to me last time. Oh, there we go. Go back. It's like weird, my little clicker thing like disappears. So yeah, they had first named her Xena, but then there was already a Xena, like an asteroid named Xena, so they had to rename her. But Eris and Xena have a resonance. Anyhow, she's the farthest known object in the solar system, large enough to be a planet, but she's considered a dwarf planet. She takes 560 years to go around the sun, so she has a longer trajectory than Pluto, and takes approximately 5 to 8 years to go through one single degree. And she's essentially a planetary archetype that forces change and shift and evolution. I mean, she's the goddess of discord. In the story, she threw the apple into the ring of all the goddesses. Whoever's the fairest, take this apple, and then everybody fought over it. So she does that, let's see everybody's ego come up. And, Joan of Arc had a very powerful Eris in her chart, and so she's an example, like the fierce warrior feminine. I wanted to speak to her because she's important, but I am still doing my own journey with her. So now I'm just going to tell you about the Moon and Venus a little bit. They're the only feminine planets in the basic 10, as I mentioned. The Moon has to do, rules Cancer, and definitely has to do with mothering and nurturing, but it also is about intuition, past lives, ancestry, our childhood. It's a place where we can feel safe and secure, where we seek safety and security. It's a place where we feel we belong. Whereas Ceres is more about physical nourishment and nurturing. This can be about emotional nourishment and nurturing. Both Moon and Ceres you look at to be understanding your own mother and how you experienced her, and the archetypal mother and how you'd experience her, and then how you would mother or nurture or express that kind of energy out into the world. There is an 8-fold lunar cycle, and I'm not going to teach each of them because that would be like adding a whole 20 to 30 minutes in a lecture, but I do want to speak to it just briefly because we're now in a resonant part of the cycle with the sun, so I'm going to explain this. The lunar cycle has 8 phases, and right now we're in the disseminating moon, but we're heading into this portal of time called Samhain, also known as Halloween. And so I was just talking to Zeffi about this. So how many people believe Samhain or Halloween is October 31st? Like the actual portal of Samhain? I mean, most people think it is because it's on the calendar. I know. So I love to research, so I have to dig. And the cross-quarter points, the cross-quarter days, also the fire festivals, are literally the midpoint between the solstices and the equinoxes. So we had fall equinox on September 21st or 22nd. I'm not remembering. It can be different each year, and I don't remember this year. And then we'll have winter solstice December 21st. The exact midpoint between those two is the cross-quarter day of Samhain. Samhain, the exact midpoint would be when the sun transits 15 degrees of Scorpio. That would be the literal midpoint between 0 Libra and 0 Capricorn. That happens on November 7th. So that's actually solar Samhain, astrological Samhain. There's also lunar Samhain, which happens at the new moon in Scorpio, which is different every year. This year, new moon in Scorpio is 11/11. So we've got solar Samhain on November 7th through 8th. It transits the 15th degree overnight into the next day. We have lunar Samhain on 11/11. And then there's another cycle that used to be associated with Samhain. It was the culmination of the Pleiades. So back in the ancient days with the Celts, their Samhain would be when the Pleiades was exactly above head at midnight. And 1,000 years ago, that was on October 31st. But 1,000 years ago, we also had a whole different calendar system. We weren't in the Gregorian calendar system, so I don't even know what they called it then, but it was something else. Today, the Pleiades culminates on November 21st. So these are the things, the 3 things that the ancients would associate Samhain with. It was either solar Samhain, lunar Samhain, or the Pleiades culminating. None of them happen on October 31st. So October 31st is like this abstract time put on the calendar that correlated with something a while ago, but is not resonant cosmically today. And there are some conspiracy theorists that tell you that they purposefully, whoever they are, purposefully put these holy days on days that are not aligned with the cycles so that we didn't have access to the magic and the portal that is them. So if you want to know, if you want to connect in with the portal, with the energy, I would go with November 7th through 8th, November 11th, especially the dark moon leading up to the new moon in Scorpio, the couple days before November 11th, or if you want to connect with Pleiades, November 21st. Essentially the whole entire month of Scorpio, from November, the November part of Scorpio. Today, you can still see it as Samhain, but it's almost like it's like opening the door, and then you've got this whole walkway to go through to like really access the energies. So the moon phases, and the reason I'm mentioning that now is that Samhain is the dark moon time of the year. So each solstice, equinox, or cross-quarter day is associated with one of the phases of the moon. Winter solstice is the new moon, and summer solstice is the full moon. Samhain is the dark moon. So we're heading into the dark moon time of the year, where it's like less and less light, and it's more inward, and it's about death and letting go and renewing and regenerating and preparing for the new cycle that's going to follow. The moon phases connect us to Earth and our bodies and the cycles of nature. And I'm just going to explain the new moon and the full moon and the dark moon, and if you want to learn about the other ones, you can Google them, or I teach classes or whatever. The new moon is a very young Aries energy. It's a time of planting seeds, beginning new cycles. It's the complete end of an old one. The dark moon is now done, and a new one is coming in. And it has a lot to do with emergence. And that is at the time, if you're going to correlate it with the solar cycle, new moon and winter solstice in the northern hemisphere are, mirror reflections of each other. The full moon is like the climax, crisis, or culmination point. It's the fulfillment of what was seeded at the new moon can be realized at the full moon, but also illuminating where we kind of went off track and what we thought we intended. We could find another thing coming up to fruition at the full moon. And it all depends on intention and action that is followed with, the intentions followed by conscious action. And this would correlate with summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. And then the dark moon, balsamic moon, is my favorite part of the moon. And this is a time of hibernation. It's a time of turning within, of retreating, introspecting, reflecting, releasing, letting go. It can be a time of losses and endings, but the journey is to understand that we go through these cycles. It's part of life, that there's life and there's death. And if we didn't have death, we'd have a very interesting experience on Earth of overpopulation and I don't even know what else. So there's a need for the letting go phase, even though it's, the ego doesn't like that part of the phase so much. And we are in that in terms of, the solar cycle. We're heading into that letting go piece for the next couple of months. Now Venus, she's the goddess of love, pleasure, and beauty. And she governs self-worth and our values. She rules Taurus and Libra, two of the Venus-ruled signs. Taurus specifically speaks to our embodiment and our pleasure and the five senses. Taurus is a sign that likes good food, good wine, and high thread count sheets. And she enjoys it. And yes, she does.
And what?
And high thread count sheets. Like very soft, the higher the thread count, it's like, and they're expensive too, so you pay for it. She's, Taurus is very much about money, security, material comforts. It can be overly materialistic, but it's also about abundance and generosity, and it's about enjoying life, slowing down, smelling the roses, tasting the food. That's how Venus expresses through Taurus. Through Libra, she expresses in terms of partnership and balance and relationship, which is actually why some people who include the asteroid goddesses say Juno should be governing Libra, because Venus, her actual mythical archetype, was not about partnership and give and take, and unless it was give and take of pleasure. She wasn't about relationship traditionally the way Juno is. So Venus, I just wanted to talk about the fivefold Venus cycle. She forms a pentacle in the sky. Over 8 years, she stations retrograde 5 times and does this dance and forms this beautiful star here on the right. And that's why pentacles and stars, and if you cut an apple in half, like not in half upwards, but horizontally, you'll see this star point in the fruit. An apple is often associated with the goddess, but you can do it with other fruits, I think, too. And so she forms this in her 8-year period, and let's see, Venus retrograde is traditionally a time to reflect on your values, your relationships, your finances, your self-worth. The energy's still there, even though these planets have moved on, so they're not in the first degree anymore, but they seeded something, and that's a pretty picture of Venus and Jupiter. Right now, Venus, Jupiter, and Mars are all with each other. Like if you get up really early in the morning, you can see it. I don't get up that early because I have a 5-year-old, but I would. And it's beautiful, and there's all this energy that's generating in the Virgo part of your chart and in the Virgo part of the sky. But the North Node is also just moved into Virgo. There's 2 variations of the North Node, the mean and the true. So one of them moved into Virgo, the next one moves in on 11/11, but we're in it, like it's about to move. And whenever the North Node moves into a new sign, there's a whole new cycle, or rather focus on where we're evolving, what we're moving into, what we're meant to grow into. And so this shift into Virgo, there's all this stuff generating, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Virgo, and yet the North Node is there, or heading there, depending on which one you look at. And so there's something about the Virgo part of the sky and the Virgo part of our charts that we're being called to evolve. And this energy is like opening that portal, but there may be a clearing out that needs to happen first. So it all depends, like if you're Pisces rising, Virgo's in your 7th house of relationship. So it's like heralding this major new energy and evolution coming into partnerships, but it may require you to release something first, to clear something out. It's like you're getting the foundation set for like the amazing stuff that wants to come in. And I write horoscopes, so you can go on my website to see what it means for everyone, but I just wanted to give that one as an example. It's like there's a clearing, we're in this dark moon phase of the solar year. It's like, what do we need to let go of? What do we need to release so that we can call in, the next cycle?
You do natal charts?
Yeah, I do readings, and I think that might be the next. I think this is my last thing. So that's my website, and it's divineharmony.org. And I write a ton. I write free content. I also have a subscriber service, so I have like content just for members. I do readings. I am in Sedona, but I haven't really put myself out in Sedona. So I do most of my readings on the phone, and they're recorded, or when I travel with my husband at his retreats and whatnot. I don't really have a space set up for doing readings in Sedona, but I might work on that. I teach webinar classes. I'm going to be teaching my next in-depth astrology webinar series in January. And I teach both beginner and intermediate classes. I do one-on-one private lessons. I co-teach retreats and weekend workshops with my husband. I'll be teaching at Sedona Yoga Festival next year, Bhakti Fest, Shakti Fest. So my passion is writing and teaching. I love it. And I will leave you with this. God is blessed.